This is a very quick demonstration of how to set up Reaper for 5.1 surround mixing. This is done in 2022, so Reaper has become a bit more mature in their 5.1 tools, like their new ReaSurroundPan and a few other things. So it's actually possible to do quite a decent job in here. Now, side note, I don't do TV mixing in Reaper, so what I'm about to show you is from a little bit of experimentation and from teaching. So if there's a better way to do this, please let me know. Also, this video is recorded for the third year sound design class at the open window, but we might make this public and other people might see this. So just remember the context of what this is recorded in. This is for film and TV post-production first and foremost. Now, I want to do this as quickly as I can because I can get quite long-winded. And the first thing you have to do when you set up surround sound is to set your master track to be 6 channels in width. That's 6 channels for 5.1. That's the one thing you do, and the other thing you do is you check that the hardware output goes to 6 channels here. This used to be more convoluted, but a few years ago Reaper actually added this output routing here. Later on, we're going to add a different option here that allows you to do stereo fold downs, but in this first video, I just want to do the basic 5.1 mix down. So that's the first thing. Now, you can have all your tracks go directly to your output, to your master, but I'm going to add a Submaster track in our routing here, and hopefully later on in the second and third video this will make more sense to you why, in terms of loudness metering and other effects and other routing. And also, this layout that I'm going to do here is not what I recommend that you do for your surround projects. I highly recommend that you put group tracks in there in between, dialogue and effects and music group tracks, but I'll demonstrate how to do the Submaster, and the same principle applies. But for this very first one, let's keep it very simple. I'm just going to have a mono, a stereo, and a surround track going out to my surround master. And please don't set up your projects like this. Have those extra layers for good reasons. I have my first track. Let's make that mono. My second track, let's make that stereo. And my third, which is going to be a 5.1 surround. Let's start with the third one because I'm going to use a blitzstone to see if this works. And the same principle applies in terms of setting these other tracks. Now I have, I go to the track routing, and the first thing you must always do is set it to 6. Even if it's a mono track, the output needs to be 6 channels wide because you are panning a mono signal to all these 6 different channels or 5 different channels and your LFE. So this is how you do it in the very simple setup. It's going to work a bit different with the master send when we get to other groups, but for now, let's keep this simple. So this is the surround track, and then on the inserts, you're going to add ReaSurroundPan. There are 2 different ones. There's the old ReaSurround that looks like this, but this one had some weirdness where if you pan stuff, there's null points and speaker overlaps and settings to try to control for that, but it didn't work as a full standard panner. So don't use the one that says ReaSurround. Let me open the full effects pane here and remove it. Use the one that is ReaSurroundPan over there. And then the first thing you do, this is a 5.1 surround track, so input channels will be 6 for that. This is going to be a 5.1 file on there. And now there's this 5.1 surround and the 5.1 ITU. The only difference I've spotted here is that this one's got the circle and some of the other controls behave slightly differently. But I would select this one as a default, but you can also use the 5.1 surround. Let's use 5.1 surround, tick that 4 is LFE, and then after that, tick reset. And then you see all of these channels are mapping to the correct speaker here. Do note that Reaper now defaults to a -3 decibel panel on this, which is more sensible than it used to. So this is the basic setup on the track. And now when we put a blitzstone on here, it should be playing back properly. Now this is a stereo screen capture and a YouTube video that only does up to stereo, so you won't be hearing the surround channels just yet. The video on fold down will make you hear all of them, so do look out for the meters down at the bottom and the meters here in our panner so that you can see which channel things are coming through. I have a blitzstone on this track here. Let's make it a bit more visible. And you'll see when I play this back, it should be coming through to speakers. I've got surround speakers around me, so I'll check it out in terms of actual audio. And that works as expected, which is great. I'm going to leave the other controls for something that isn't a tone like this. So this is the basic setup, and let's move over to our stereo track and play around with all of that. Remember, for your project, you want the split tone to be right at the start, and you want to start your actual audio content at the 20-second mark. Moving over to the stereo track, we're doing exactly what we did before. We open the routing first. We are making this 6-channel. Remember, for the channel, they all have to be 6. If we do 7.1 surround, they all have to be 8. And it's on the panner that you set the input in terms of stereo, mono, and 5.1. So I'm going to add that same ReaSurroundPan to this track. And now, again, make it 5.1 ITU, and now it is defaulting to 2 channels, which is correct. And now when I hit reset, they go on to the correct speakers there. There's no LFE here because remember, this is just a stereo signal, no LFE input. And this is now correct for playback. So let's grab a file. This is one you listen to in class if you're in the 2022 class, which is a stereo music cue. Sounds like this. And now I want to show you a few extra things you can do with this panner. You can do it all, but some of it's a little bit fiddly, so play around with all of these things. Most DAWs will have a panner which on a stereo track will default to these 2 things being grouped, but this one defaults to individual movement. So if I move this guy to my rear speaker, the other one stays in place. It's nice to be able to reset with 1 click, but if you want to move them together, first go to Edit All, and now you can move these 2 pucks together. And this edit all applies to other stuff too, in terms of any of these drop downs or these faders. If you group them together, they will respond together. 2 other things I want to point out here. Do play around with things on this menu. Something like rotation, for example. If I rotate, then when I have this XY flip, they rotate in opposite directions. If I have this unticked, then they're going to rotate in one or the other direction in terms of panning. And this guy makes sense for stereo. It gets a bit weird with 5.1 tracks. Actually, let me show you that quickly. If I open my 5.1 panner and I go to rotation and I keep this on, then everything rotates except the right channel. So if you want to rotate a 5.1 signal, untick that, then you can rotate. But back to our stereo track. Rotating is one thing you want to do. You can drag stuff, play around with these features. But I want to show you over here, this drop down gives you other options like LFE, divergence, and delay. We will cover how to set up an LFE in a separate video. But over here, I want to show you divergence. And if I say edit selected and I take my left channel and I bring up this fader, have a look what happens on the picture. It shows you it's going to play back over more speakers. It's a bigger source. Now this is something that if you go up to something like Atmos mixing, there's different views you can enable here to see how that source grows in 3D space, which is useful. There's also height stuff here, which obviously does not apply to 5.1 mixing. So I'm going to keep it flat for now and the divergence to 0. But that is the different options you have there. Exactly the same thing applies to a mono track. Same steps apply. The only difference is you set this to 1 channel and you have a single puck there. So I'm not going to show you that right now. So that's the basic setup we have here. This is okay for basic mixing, panning, export, but I will have more videos to show you how to do groups, how to do submasters, and how to do everything else. So don't just watch this one.